Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining me. This is the second installment of our emergency episode series. This is about the most recent disclosure, the second disclosure outlet from the US government. It's centered around 51 videos. That's the number at the heart of the second release. Not documents this time, nor photographs. 51 individual clips of footage pulled from military sensors and government archives, dropped onto a public website by the United States Department of War. Now, for years, this is exactly what people said they wanted. Forget the testimony, forget the leaked memos, show us the footage. Well, here it is, and there's 51 pieces of evidence. So today we're going to go inside the headline clips, one by one, what is actually in the frame, and what the government itself says about it. And this is the part that matters, the gap between what the footage shows and what the people are claiming it proves. But I'll tell you that in the conclusion before we start, and I'll show you the working. Each one of the 5 videos we're going to talk about is real, and not one of them on its own settles anything. But both of the statements are true at the same time, and you can hold them together. They are real, they are true. They may not conclusively prove anything. So first, where the 51 videos came from, because it changes how you read them. They weren't volunteered. Back in March, members of the House of Representatives put in a formal request for specific UAP-related records. The footage in the release is, in the large part, the response to that request. The Pentagon's own description says it is requested by lawmakers and located by the AARO, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, the unit whose job it is to investigate exactly this type of stuff. And attached to the videos is a disclaimer, and we hammered that in the last episode because it governs everything we're about to look at. The Pentagon says many of these materials lack a substantiated chain of custody. The descriptions tell you when and where each clip was likely taken, not confirmed, but likely. So as you go through these, every single one carries that invisible asterisk, and you've got to keep that in mind. So let's move first to clip 1, and it's probably the big one at Lake Huron. This is the video that led every broadcast. It appears to show the moment a US fighter jet shot down an unidentified object over the lake on February the 12th, 2023. Now, you may remember the real-world event. February 2023 was a strange few days. A Chinese surveillance balloon had crossed the continental United States and was shot down off the coast. And in the jittery aftermath, air defense on a hair trigger, radar filters widened to catch anything. American jets shot down a string of other objects over North America in the space of about a week. One over Alaska, one over the Yukon alongside Canada, and one over Lake Huron on the Canadian border. Now, at the time, officials were strikingly vague about what those 3 objects actually were. The working theory floated publicly was that some may have been denying hobbyist or research balloons swept up in the panic. We never got a clean answer, and now years later, there's footage of at least one of them, and the footage doesn't close the question. In fact, it's exactly the opposite. It reopens it. So what's in the frame? Grainy, infrared, military-grade sensor video. A targeting feed. You see the object, you see the engagement. It is, by any standard, a remarkable thing for a government to release. The actual moment its own military fired on something it cannot name. But here is where you earn the right to an opinion. The AARO attached an assessment to this clip, and we've got to read carefully what this actually certifies. The official explanation was that the video is likely derived from an infrared sensor aboard a US military platform operating in US airspace. Notice what they're vouching for: the camera, the sensor, the platform. They are authenticating the lens, but they are saying nothing about what the object was. And that's not an oversight, that's the honest limit of what they can say. A real military jet really did fire on a real object near Lake Huron. What the object was this footage does not tell you. It could have been an unknown craft, could have been a balloon, could have been debris. The video proves that the engagement happened, but it does not identify the thing it hit. And that's probably the whole lesson of the release in a single clip, maybe even disclosure as a whole. Dramatic footage, genuine event, but a huge question mark over exactly what the answer is. Now we move to clip 2, the formation. One of the release videos show multiple objects flying in formation over the Persian Gulf. Now we've got to be careful here. The reporting on this specific clip varies. Different outlets have given different dates and different counts of how many objects there were. So I can't give you a hard number, but what I can tell you is that every account agrees on one thing. It is a formation, more than one object, holding a pattern, moving together. And that's the detail that genuinely unsettles the people who fly for a living. A single light in the sky, well, that could be anything. Multiple objects maintaining a formation? Well, formation flight implies coordination. Coordination implies either intelligent control or a shared mechanical system. Now, coordination is an interpretation, not a fact in the footage. The footage shows objects, multiple of them, in a pattern. They were coordinated is the meaning that we're hanging on to. It's tier 3. You've got to hold it loosely, but you can see why the formation clips are the ones that keep former pilots up at night. There is something incredibly strange and very hard to effectively distinguish and identify, as well as even describe and form a theory about multiple objects in a formation that we have no known reasoning for. Now let's move to clip 3, the submarine. This one is strange in a different way. The government released footage of US forces tracking a foreign submarine. Now that is all pretty standard, but as the video runs, a UAP becomes visible in the same frame, sea and sky in one shot. Now obviously you can imagine why this one set the internet alight. It feeds directly into what researchers call the transmedium hypothesis, the claim that some of these objects move freely between air and water without slowing down, which if true would be far beyond anything we know as humans how to build. But we've got to stay disciplined. What's primary here? An object appears in frame during a submarine tracking operation. What's the interpretation? The object came out of the water, that it's transmedium, that it's the same kind of thing as the other clips. The footage does not establish any of that. A UAP being visible in the same frame at the same time as a submarine that is being tracked is not the same thing as a UAP emerging from the sea. Proximity in a video frame is not a physics demonstration, it's a coincidence until proven otherwise, and it has not been proven otherwise. Now let's move to clip 4. The shape, they say, is new. Among the 51 videos, the government flagged one video as showing a UAP shape that has not previously appeared in any released footage. There are also clips described as unusually sharp, clearer than the smeared infrared blobs we've been shown for years. Now, a shape that's not been seen before sounds enormous, but think about what it actually claims. It's a statement about the catalogue of previously released footage, not a statement about the object's origin. A new shape on the public record could mean a genuinely novel craft. It could also mean the government has had this particular clip filed away and hadn't put it out until now. Newly released is not the same as newly existing. A shape can be new to us, but old to them. Now, the sharper images matter more, because clarity is one thing this entire field has always been lacking. If even a handful of these clips are genuinely high resolution with intact sensor data, that's worth more than 50 blurry ones. We'll know once the independent analysts get into the actual files, and we'll keep you updated. Clip 5 is the sphere, and the one nobody wants to mention. There's a clip showing a small spherical object moving over open countryside. And we've got to be direct here, because that's what this channel wants to be about. We don't want to flinch from the boring answers when the boring answer is the likely one. It could just be a balloon. Honestly, a small sphere drifting, no clear sense of scale or speed. That is a description that fits a UAP, but it's also a description that fits balloons, whether it be a weather balloon or a sensor balloon. And here's the thing that believers skip and the debunkers overclaim. The AARO itself has said for years that the most common reported UAPs are just small metallic-looking objects, sometimes performing what look unusual maneuvers. So when a sphere shows up in this release, it's not exotic. It is the single most common category in the entire dataset, and that cuts both ways. It could be the most important reoccurring signal in the entire phenomenon, or it could be the category most easily explained by the most mundane objects. The footage alone can't tell us which is which. And then there's the messier one, a clip associated with an object over Syria described in some reporting as showing instant acceleration. Now we've got to flag that one specifically because instant acceleration is the kind of phrase that travels faster than the truth. It would be extraordinary if real, but the clip itself, by at least one careful account, is far less clear-cut than the label. So I'm putting it in the interesting, it's kind of unverified, and we can't build our own worldview on this particular piece of evidence, but it goes in that pile of, if this is true, holy smokes, what is going on? Now, before we get to the verdicts on the entirety itself, we need one more piece of equipment, not a gadget, but a habit, because almost every mistake people make with this kind of footage comes from not understanding what they're actually looking at. Most of the clips are infrared, which are thermal. And infrared does not see what your eyes see, it just sees heat rendered in grayscale, which means no real colour, no reliable sense of scale. A small warm object up close and a large warm object far away can look identical on the screen. No automatic sense of distance. And the cameras themselves are bolted to moving aircraft on gimbals that rotate and track, shooting through layers of atmosphere and lens glass. So an object that appears to rotate might be just the camera's own gimbal rotating. An object that seems to shoot off at impossible speed might just be a parallax, the background shifting as the jet banks, making a slow object look like it leapt. None of that means every clip is junk. It just means you cannot read motion off infrared footage naively. Anyone who does, believer or debunker, is guessing dressed up as certainty. And here is where I will not let that point go. We've been here before, almost exactly here before. Cast your mind back to the footage the US Navy officially released. The 3 clips the world came to know as the FLIR-1, Gimbal and GoFast. When those came out, they were presented as a smoking gun. Objects with no wings, no exhaust, apparently defying physics. And for a while, that footage was the entire conversation. But then careful analysts went to work. Not cynics trying to kill the story, but people who took it seriously enough to do the actual geometry. And annoyingly, what they found was pretty sobering. The GoFast object that looked like it was screaming across the ocean's surface, well, when you work out the angles and its real speed, it was fairly ordinary. The drama was just a parallax illusion created by the camera's depression angle and the jet's own motion. The gimbal object that seemed to rotate in a way nothing should, well, a leading explanation was it was a glare from a conventional jet engine turning in step with the camera optics. Now we've got to be fair because it genuinely cuts both ways. Those explanations are contested, not everyone accepts them, and the pilot who watched the things with their own eyes insists the footage never captured how wrong the encounters felt in the moment. So I'm not going to say that the Navy videos were definitely mundane. I'm telling you something more useful than that. Footage that looked like absolute proof to millions of people turned out to have plausible, ordinary explanations that none of these millions have ever heard. The proof thinned out under analysis, but the headlines never ran that correction. So that is the trap sitting inside the 51 clips right now. Today, they look like proof, but give independent analysts 6 months with the raw files, and some of them will quietly dissolve into glare, parallax, and balloons. Others maybe won't. The clips that survive that scrutiny are the ones worth your attention, and the ones that don't, well, you're unlikely to ever see a correction. So do not lock your certainty in on day one. The footage is a start of an investigation, not the verdict at the end of one. So let's zoom out on what do these 51 videos actually add up to. I think the honest assessment and the skeptic's strongest point, so I'm not going to dodge it, most of the footage is the same grainy, infrared, incomplete material the public have been showing for the last several years. Many of the clips are blurry, many lack the surrounding sensory data. The radar returns, the calibration, the full instrument picture. That's what you need to do real scientific analysis. A video of a dot with no scale, no range and no metadata can support almost any interpretation you bring to the table. And that's not evidence, that's a Rorschach test. And yet, I'm not going to let the debunkers have the last word either, because that would just be as lazy. Strip away the hype and there is still a hard residue here that just doesn't go away. A military jet really did fire on an unidentified object over American waters. Objects really were recorded flying in formation. The AARO, the government's own investigation unit, really do say on the record that they cannot identify the most common category of these things. That's not tabloids talking, that's the institution whose literal job it is to know, admitting it does not know. And then there's the pattern underneath the individual clips. That's easy to miss when you're staring at each one of them on their own. For decades, across different administrations, different aircraft, different oceans, trained military aviators have reported the same handful of shapes, spheres and discs. Things with no obvious means of propulsion, and people with careers and security clearances on the line. They gain nothing by finding these reports and risk everything, ridicule and even termination from their job. So the consistency itself is a data point. It doesn't tell you what the objects are, but it makes they're all just mistakes and balloons a harder position to hold than the debunkers like to admit. Mistakes are usually random, and this isn't random. So here's where I think I land, and I'll say it plainly so you can disagree with me if you want in the comments. The strong claim that these 51 videos prove non-human technology is not supported by the footage. People that tell you it is are mixing primary evidence into interpretation without showing they're working. But the opposite strong claim that there's nothing here, that it's all balloons and blur, is also not supported. The footage shows real objects and real engagement, and real institutions are admitting ignorance. The intellectually honest position sits in the uncomfortable middle. Something is being recorded repeatedly by serious instruments and serious professionals, and no one with access has been able to explain it. That is a smaller claim than aliens, but it's also much harder to give away. And I know a lot of this episode has been saying what doesn't exist, but it's only fair I tell you what does, because we don't know is not the same as we can't ever know. Strong evidence on this subject looks like four things stacked together. 1. Multiple sensors capturing the same object at the same moment, infrared and radar, as well as visible light and calibrated range readings, all agree. A single grainy clip can lie to you, but 4 instruments lying in the same way at once is a lot harder. Number 2, a known scale and distance. So you can calculate real size and real speed instead of guessing a number from a smear. And number 3, repeatability. The same kind of object behaving the same way, recorded again and again under conditions that rule out one easy explanation. And lastly, raw, uncompressed data with the full instrument record attached, handed to independent scientists who don't work for an agency that produced it. So hold these 51 clips up against that bar, a handful might clear it. We won't know until the raw files are independently verified, but most of what has been released is a single sensor, no scale, compressed with its government's own note that the chain of custody isn't established. Now this isn't a knock on the phenomena itself, it's a knock on the evidence as it's being released. So the difference between these two things is a difference between thinking clearly and just believing what the footage flatters you into feeling. So next episode, we leave the footage behind and go where almost no one is looking. The 7 NASA audio recordings that wildly get misreported, and 6 documents buried under all of the videos. Because if the videos are the spectacle, then the paperwork is where the real tells are hiding. As ever, thank you so much for joining me today. If there's any comments that you have, please pop them down below. If we've misinterpreted, misinformed, if you've got a different viewpoint, let's talk about it together and let's find the truth. Until next time, I will see you in episode 3 of our emergency episode series.